But if you don't have that personal relationship with your team, you're not going to know which one's which, and you're going to get it wrong, and people are going to leave.
Welcome to the Woodlands Area Chamber of Commerce Young Professional Network podcast, a show where we discuss topics related to business, lifestyle, politics, and other challenges that young professionals are facing. We want our millennials and Gen Z to strengthen today for your impact on tomorrow.
Welcome to the YPN Network podcast series. We are here to discuss some topics. So I'm Margo McZeal, Director of Government Affairs, and we have
Chazzette, Director of Marketing and Communications.
And our guest today, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. Thank you for having me. I'm Jim Carman. I'm president of the Houston region for the Howard Hughes Corporation, and been in the role for a couple of years now. Howard Hughes is a real estate development company who develops master plan communities around the country. We say from Wall Street to Waikiki, but I'm president of the Houston region. The Houston region is focused here in the Woodlands, where our headquarters for the whole company is, in Bridgeland, which is on the northwest side of Houston, and then the Woodlands Hills, which is just north of the Woodlands.
Awesome. Well, we're excited to have you today, Jim. And
thank you for having me.
For you to drop some knowledge on this particular topic we're going to be talking about today.
Get your popcorn ready.
Yes.
I'm gonna throw some truth.
That's what we need. So I just advise everyone to grab a notepad, pen, and get ready to take some notes. So I'm going to throw it to Chazzette to introduce our topic.
Right, so today's topic is how to avoid burnout at work. And, it's a big conversation all over social media where all of the young professionals are. It's, every blog writer has it, every HR person is talking about it. Everywhere you go on LinkedIn, you see statuses about it. So we're here to hear it from a CEO himself, how to avoid burnout at work. But first, in doing some research, I wanted to touch on the difference between stress and burnout, because a lot of people couple it together, and there are actually differences. So I'm going to start with the differences, and then we'll jump in. So stress is when you put in too much effort. Burnout is when it's hard to put in any effort. Stress is when you feel emotions more strongly, and burnout is when your emotions feel blunted. Stress is when you feel hyperactive and anxious, and burnout is when you feel drained and helpless. Stress is when you have less energy, and burnout is when you have less motivation. And stress is, it takes a physical toll on you, whereas burnout actually takes an emotional toll on you. So now that we know the differences, and we could address, burnout with a better definition than coupling it together with stress, because psychologists would say they're two completely different things.
Right.
We could go into Jim. Tell us about your work history coming up. How you got your start, how you tackled incidences of stress or even burnout.
Yeah. Well, I grew up knowing that I wanted to be in some type of building. I loved building. I loved drawing buildings. I loved everything related. My dad worked for Caterpillar, the big construction equipment company, and so I grew up seeing that. So I thought I wanted to be a civil engineer. I went to Texas A&M. I got my engineering degree, and when I graduated, I realized I did not want to be an engineer. I wanted to be out in the field and smell concrete early in the morning and actually be a part of it. And so I joined a construction company in downtown Miami out of school.
Okay.
And, it was funny. It was my first real job, I guess you could say, after college. And I called my boss a few days before I started, and I was trying to figure out, in construction, the time of when you start and stop can be different depending on the site or what you're doing. It could be early in the morning, or it could be later if you can't work early in the morning. So I wanted to feel out from him when I should show up. And so I called him and said, hey, what kind of work day are you guys doing down there? What should I expect when I show up? And he said, well, we have a flexible schedule here. Sounds pretty good. He said you can show up anytime before 6 and you can leave anytime after 7. And he wasn't talking about 7 a.m. So
yes, not pretty flexible.
So it was pretty clear very early on what the expectation is of a young project engineer, which I was on that project. And so, you know, I jumped in with both feet, did well on that project and worked my way up in construction, ended up moving to Grand Cayman down in the Caribbean, and took on responsibility to build the Ritz-Carlton Grand Cayman.
Wow.
And it was a big project. My wife and I moved down there. Of course, it's in the Caribbean. It's a great place to live and work. But similar thing there. A lot of people say, "Oh, that must have been so awesome living in the Caribbean. You must have been on the beach all day and all that stuff." Actually,
that's what I was
we
thinking.
had a very tight time frame on the project. We ended up working 7 days a week the last 5 months of the project. I didn't have one day off for 5 months. But I will tell you, looking back, that was some of the best times of my life. Because I was enjoying the work so much, we were getting so much done, and we had a big goal in mind, and we knew we could hit it if we all worked together, and we did. And we ended up hitting it, and it was very rewarding for all of us. So, you know, it took a little time after that 5 months to get back to a normal schedule, honestly, but that was then. So after that, I moved to Las Vegas, Nevada, did some development out there, office, retail, mixed use. I was in Las Vegas for about 6 years, and then Howard Hughes hired me to come back to the Houston area where I grew up. I grew up in Cypress. And I've been with the company almost 10 years. I've been in my role now just over 2 as president. I started as a senior project manager with Howard Hughes, responsible for construction and development. My first project was Creekside Park Village Green down in Creekside Park. And so I worked my way up through Howard Hughes as well. You know, it's been through obviously a lot of hard work, a lot of luck, a lot of great mentors, and for some parts of my life, a very poor work-life balance. But I will say intentional for the most part in that way. And so yeah, that's how I got to where I'm at, and so it's been a great run and enjoying my role now, and really very rewarding. Couldn't imagine a cooler job than mine, building communities and doing it with a great team.
Yeah, it sounds pretty amazing. And your experience traveling for different locations and doing what you love sounds pretty cool. I would love to get the inside look and understanding on transitioning from state to state. How was that for you? How did you handle that work-life balance? Handling having a family and then also trying to maintain that job atmosphere?
Well, you said it right there, family. You know, I moved around a lot. It's part of our business a little bit, although plenty of folks in my business stay in one spot, but you know, that was not my experience. I moved a lot. But it started with my wife. We've been married over 20 years. We got married a month out of college. And having a spouse that's supportive of you and your goals, and you know, it's just there's nothing more important, I can't imagine, than that for me, having that support, because you know, there's a lot related to moving beyond just your job. You know, it's you know, where you're going to live and how you're going to set up bills and all these other things, and having a teammate basically in that regards and a champion has been huge for me. I always looked at the opportunity. This came from my mom. My mom always encouraged. I grew up in a single parent household. My mom, she encouraged me when I got out of college, go chase it, go to Miami. You know, I was in College Station, you know, in Cyprus. So she encouraged me, go chase your dreams. And so, you know, that was big for me to always be open to opportunities. You know, I'm not a job hopper per se, but if I ever felt like in a job where I got to the point where I was comfortable doing what I was doing, I realized very quickly something's wrong.
Right.
I should not feel comfortable at any time in terms of what I'm doing, because then I'm probably not learning and pushing myself. And that's very much the case today. People, you know, think, they may look at me and think, oh, he's got it all together. Trust me. Every day I wake up, I'm like, how the heck am I going to do this? And that's what I want. I want that. And I hope that stays that way till I decide to hang on.
Awesome.
Yeah. So I have a question for you. You said that you didn't really have a good work-life balance when you were in the Cayman. And how did that affect you?
You know, I say that it was some of the best times of my life, and I guess this ties more a little bit to work-life balance and people feel about it. Everybody is unique. Everybody has their own idea of that. And a lot of it's personal, you know. I mean, I've got teammates right now that, you know, 8 to 5, clock in, clock out, and if you send them an email at 5:15, they're like, whoa, boss, slow down, you know. And then I've got others who I'm like, you need to go home, you know, like get home. You've been working too much. And I wouldn't say that there's a huge difference between those two folks in terms of their workload or anything, you know, in terms of what we give them to do. A lot of that is personal, right? I mean, I've seen you guys work like crazy. I bet your last job before you came here, you worked like crazy, and you probably work like crazy when you're in college, all that stuff. A lot of that's DNA. And so you have to be very cognizant of that and thoughtful of that personally. Mm-hmm. So what is work-life balance for me? It might be that I work 12 hours a day, and you know what? If I've got a job that was 8, I would be going nuts. I'd be going crazy.
Right.
Or it's, look, I need a job where I have free time in the evenings. I cannot deal with, you know, and that's a very personal thing. I know for me personally, I enjoy my work. I enjoy the people I work with. I don't think about work-life balance in the sense of, you know, if I'm having to do some stuff after hours or on the weekends. I do think very much about what I'm prioritizing, but I don't stress about if I'm having to work on a Saturday, as long as that's a priority for me over something else that I could be doing. And again, this comes from my mom. My single mom, she opened an office, if you know where Northwest Mall is. She opened a kiosk that sold insurance in the mall.
Oh, wow.
In 1985. I was, I'll date myself, I was 8 years old. And when you're in the mall, you have to be open when the mall's open, 7 days a week. She was the only employee. She worked from 9 to 9, Monday through Friday, or Monday through Saturday, and then I think it was 10 to 6 on Sundays, 7 days a week for years. And so I saw that growing up. She made it very clear to me. I wouldn't see my mom until sometimes, 10 o'clock at night. I was 8, 9 years old, unlocking the door by myself.
Oh, wow.
So she made it very clear, your job is to go to school, your job is to stay out of trouble. I've got a lot going on, I can't be dealing with it. So you have a very important job, and that is to be a good kid and to take care of your business, and I took that very much to heart. So I have a role model there in terms of work. Now, that's certainly not for everybody, but I never heard her complain about work one time. She loved what she was doing. She was her own employer. She had her own business. She grew it successfully to the point where she did get employees and was able to, have some time off. And so, but that was her choice. She worked her whole life. And so, and again, that's part of her DNA. But it's a very individual issue. You've got to be honest with yourself about what you want in life, what your priorities are, and they will change as you grow up. I did not have a child when I was in Cayman. I would not have worked 7 days a week, 13, 15 hours a day if I had a child. I do now. It ain't happening today. Yeah. Okay, I'm not going to do it. And so, it just happened last night. I had an event that I was hoping to go to. I'm on the board of a nonprofit, and I wanted to go to that event last night. My daughter had a recital. And so, at first I was like, okay, she can go to the recital, my wife, and I can go to this. And then I saw when I was talking to my daughter about missing it, the look. Mm-hmm. And so no way I'm going to that. So I went to the recital last night. Those are decisions that you've got to make, but you got to be methodical about it. You got to think about what your priorities are and base your decisions on that.
Yeah, and those are hard decisions. Mm-hmm. And speaking of your mom, I know my mom was the same way. She worked really hard. What do you think the phase from that generation to us now, what is the difference in that recharge, lack of motivation that we're just missing right now as we are working and having a family? I just felt like my mom was Superwoman. She did everything, didn't complain, made a way whenever things needed to be done. But for us, it's more of well, I don't want to do it. Should I do it? This is not what I really want to get into. So what are your thoughts on the differences in that generation gap?
I think a lot of it is generational. Work-life balance wasn't getting talked about back in those days, Sure. And depending on where you were at in your career, what you were doing, she was doing that to, you know, not to get ahead in business. She was doing it to pay our rent, you know, and put food on the table. So, you know, those are things that in those days, I think that there wasn't as much pressure, I think, for that work-life balance. Again, I think we can stress ourselves out sometimes thinking, well, I don't have a good work-life balance. I see my friends going on vacations a lot more often than me, or you know, I can't go meet up with them at 5:30, you know, after work and have a happy hour, and it adds stress to us. You know, I think that stress, you know, if we try to make work-life balance perfect, it's never perfect. You're always going to have imbalances. The best work-life time that I ever had was when I got laid off in 2009 in Vegas because the market was in trash and I lived in the mountains for 2 months and grew a beard. I wasn't stressing about work at all until I, you know, checked my bank statement and realized I better get back to work. You know, I think that it's not just a generational thing. You've got people, again, across America today that are working way more than they need to, and are doing it and not stressing about it as well. But I think that if we pay attention too much to what other people are doing and not be mindful of our own goals, our own internal drive, it can lead to some of that, you know, feeling that, you know, I'm working too much and I need to take more time off.
And I think you said it best. So you have to look at your own self, what works for you, in that sense of work-life balance. So I really like that.
Yeah, and be honest with yourself, but be honest with your spouse or partner. Be honest with your employer, and say, look, this is how much I'm willing to work. I need time off for X, and just especially with a spouse, you know, because my spouse today understands the challenges in my schedule, and that sometimes, you know, I'm not going to be there, you know, for that recital. There's times I won't be able to make that choice, but I've got to be very methodical about that, thoughtful, and communicate in advance.
Yeah, that's the key.
Well, you said that, you know, in the past when you felt like a job wasn't challenging, that's when you knew you had to get to the next level. Would you say that was one way how you avoided burnout? Because one of the list here says you have less motivation, and it's, to me, it's not in the sense that you're not motivated. It's just, you know, not that you have less challenge.
Yeah.
And can you imagine if you had stayed being less motivated because you weren't challenging? Would you say that's a way that you probably dodged burnout without realizing it?
Absolutely. I mean, I'm in a great line of work, which is it's very goal driven. We have deadlines, right? We have to deliver an MD Anderson cancer treatment facility on this date or else. And we have to build the Ritz-Carlton Hotel by this date. Sheryl Crow's coming in for the grand opening, and we're going to be there. And so those are great things to have in front of you to give you motivation and kind of takes your mind off of the fact that, hey, I'm putting in some extra time. I think that did a lot for me. Absolutely. So, you know, I think it's also enjoying your work and enjoying your coworkers. Like if, you know, a lot of the things you talk about, burnout, motivation, and emotions, I mean, if you're enjoying your work, and I'm not one of those guys that's going to say, like, if you love what you do, you'll never work a day in your life. That's BS. You know, I don't love my job every single day. Absolutely not. But many days I do. And it's why? Because I like the work, and most importantly, probably, I like the people I work with. Yeah. You know, if you're in a place where you don't like either one of those, go somewhere else, do something different. I mean, life's too short. I mean, we have I can't say the word, but we have a no jerk rule in our office. And if you're a jerk, you gone. It doesn't happen because I ain't got time for it. None of our team members do. Exactly. And it's just going to bring us all down. So it's a zero policy. And so enjoy the people you work with because you're going to be with them a bunch more than your family even. If you don't, look for somewhere else.
Great advice. Hope everybody taking notes. These are some great nuggets. For me, I know you do a lot of work, so you're really time consumed on some projects. But do you have a mentor or someone who pours back into you to motivate you to just continue pressing on, even when there is challenges at work?
Yeah, I mean, I've had a lot of mentors over my life, professionally, personally, I guess you'd say. Again, I go back to this, my spouse, there's, and my daughter, just having those folks as motivation and, somebody that when you look at them, you know why you're working so hard. It's not hard to tell. I mentioned my mom several times. I'm trying not to talk about her too much because I'll start crying because she's passed away. She was amazing, just so strong, so hardworking. I'll never work harder than my mom did. I mean, it's never going to happen. And she didn't want to. But she instilled into me a work ethic, I think, that, where I understood that you have to work if you have goals.
Yes.
You have to put it in. And but you got to find a balance, too. I was never, although she was doing all that, I also had baseball games she was at. I also had stuff at school that she would make. She made time for all that stuff. So even though she's passed, there's not a day goes by that I don't think, okay, what would she give me a kick in the ass right now? That was what she was probably best at, if I was down, if I was burned out, if I was stressed, she'd say, hey, is that really the biggest deal going on right now, or do you just need to get back to it?
Yeah. Well, sorry.
No.
One of the biggest, the big topic, the Great Resignation, and I feel like we bring it up a lot because it is one of the biggest topics since they've had work-wise. I've done hybrid work or remote work, but the Great Resignation where people are resigning because they're burnt out. People are resigning because they're like, oh no, I cannot work with these people anymore. I enjoyed working from home. I am not going back to that office to be in that environment. And it raised a conversation of culture. And, as a CEO, how do you combat? Because I know you have the burden of not just your family, but your team. You have that burden of making sure, yes, they're doing what they're doing, but you can tell if they're not happy, and you can tell that based on productivity, based on attitude, may not be a jerk, but, we're human. How do you combat that? And how do you recommend that those who haven't gone through the Great Resignation, how do we combat that, from avoiding burnout?
Yeah, well, it goes back to, like you mentioned, the culture, enjoying the people you work with, building a camaraderie, having joint goals. Those are all critical. Your team needs to know that you love them, that you're going to have their back. And you want to talk about work-life balance? Anybody on my team knows, hey, Jim, I got this thing popped up. I got to go take care of it. Go. We got your back. We'll pick it up the slack. There's no problem. And it's not words.
Yeah. It's
reality. And they all know that. And that's critical. As leaders, I think too, we've got to set an example. So, I'm going to take my vacation days, and I'm going to take them. I'm going to take time off.
Can you say that one more time?
Yeah. And so many people don't take their vacation days.
No.
I forget the stat, but it's ridiculous. We have the lowest number of vacation days as a country, and yet people take like half of them. So you gotta set the example. It's okay for me to leave, so I leave. So maybe they see that. Right. Communicate. You're telling me that you want to be a future leader of this company. You're telling me you want to be promoted. Do you understand that you're going to take on more responsibility? Do you understand that you're going to be responsible for people now? You're a people manager. You're responsible for their success. These come with trade-offs. And some of it is a challenge to your work-life balance if you think that I'm just going to keep, doing it the same way I was when I was at this level.
Right.
So many people want to be promoted. They want to grow in their careers, and that's great. But they got to understand that it does come with additional responsibilities. And you may not, particularly in that first transition period of into that new role, know how to deal with the work-life balance. And that's okay. There's going to be phases of this. You're going to learn how to, work through that. You're going to promote from below. You're going to bring people up to fill in gaps, and that's going to allow you to focus on other areas or take a little bit more time off or go home a little sooner. You're going to give them empowerment that they can take on a project that you don't now have to feel like you have to micromanage. But it may not be day one, when you get that promotion. And you shouldn't stress about it, and you shouldn't expect it. And so it's all about the flow, and it's never going to be perfect. It's going to change over your life. No kids. Wow, something changed. Your work-life balance right there, your focus. And again, when I say focus, it's like, now I'm going to be deliberate again. I'm going to go say, okay, is it more important for me to work the extra hours so that I can get this project done and maybe get promoted? Or is it more important that, I let the team know that I've got to go to my kid's recital, and I would encourage you to go to the recital. Absolutely.
That's great.
It's not something that you're just going to snap your fingers and be good at the instant. Like, now I've got perfect work-life balance as a new employee coming out of college. I get promoted, now I have perfect work-life balance, even though I'm managing people. Forget about it.
I'm still struggling on it.
Oh yeah,
today.
Yeah.
So it's definitely not an easy task to
Yeah.
wrangle and tackle. I think
There's
it's
not a
every
playbook.
day.
Yeah.
There's not a playbook. You don't get issued a playbook. Hey, now you're responsible for people and your new role, and so you got to lean on mentors and people that have been there, done that, and then a little bit of time.
So would you say, a lot of, there's this pushback because I think, you spoke about generations,
Right.
and it's very obvious that, our generation, we speak out. We tell you how we feel. We're more open, and it's almost therapeutic because, you hold things in, you get sick, physically, what happens mentally could affect you physically, and we're very open, and we're hard to, you can see the difference because we're judged for being open, and we're a lot more emotional, which humans should be. So how would you, let's say you, just a scenario standpoint, if someone, a young professional came up to you and said, hey, Jim, do you have a minute to talk? I'm feeling really burnt out.
Yeah.
Work, home, inflation, gas prices. I'm burnt out. I'm feeling drained emotionally. How would you approach that? What recommendation do you give to leaders of companies to combat, because this is what's leading to the Great Resignation, to keep your good team members with you? What advice would you give that person, and what advice would you give to leaders of other companies to combat this Great Resignation?
Well, I think it starts with having a culture that allows for that conversation to even happen, right? You have probably gotten tired of people talking, millennials, they want this, they want that, they are outspoken. I mean, if you don't have a culture in your company where somebody can come to me and say, hey Jim, I want to talk to you about this, I'm burnt out, you're going to have a Great Resignation. I mean, it's already going to happen. It's going to be for that reason and a bunch of others. So I want to have those conversations. I want people to feel comfortable to come and talk to me about that sort of stuff. And so if and when that happens, I mean, you've got to get back to the roots. What do you want? And, what are your goals? What, we have room typically for everybody at all levels of that in the organization, right? I mean, you can't have everybody in the organization wanting to be the CEO, because it just honestly just doesn't work. And you won't have it. Some people are plenty fine, doing their job that they love, and they don't necessarily want to take on more responsibility. But you've got to understand the uniqueness of every person, of every role, and create a culture where those conversations can take place. Each one is, as you get to know people, some are going to need a kick in the butt, some are going to need an arm around the shoulder. But if you don't have that personal relationship with your team, you're not going to know which one's which, and you're going to get it wrong, and people are going to leave.
And I know for me, one of the big things, even as a millennial, I always say I'm an old soul, but one of the things that is important to me is culture, having that ability to share my thoughts and ideas and how I feel, because we're partners in this, so it's going to help you as well as helping me along this career journey. But I think that's very important. For me, my question for you would be, what is the most important thing to build morale around your team? What do you feel like is an important encouragement, support system for them as they're working with you at Howard Hughes, and what is that growth in that aspect?
Well, there's a lot of aspects to it. I mean, you asked for the number one, and it's I can definitely give you one, but there's a lot of you can't just have one. You've got to have a lot to truly motivate people. But I would say it starts with the reason why we're doing this. Why are we even here? I mean, why are you sitting here talking to me, right? You've got to understand why that is, and otherwise, you're going to get into that feeling of boredom and unmotivation. And for us, it's pretty awesome. We got the coolest job in the whole world. I apologize that
We're missing out.
That you're missing out, because we get to create communities where people spend their lives, where you raise your kids, where you have your job, and you can do it really well or you can do it really bad, and you're going to be written about and remembered for one or the other. And it's an awesome opportunity. It's a big, I don't want to say stress, but we feel the burden, I guess you'd say, of not screwing it up. And I want to feel that burden, and I want our team to feel that burden, and I want them to understand that they impact the lives of people every day. When I moved to the Woodlands, they said, hey, there's this property over here in the middle of the Woodlands, 66 acres on the lake, and we're not sure what we want to do with it. I joined the company, and me and a bunch of team members put together Hughes Landing. So yes, it's great real estate. It has great property value. We make NOI off of it, and that helps our shareholders, all that fun stuff. That's great. That's awesome. Love it. But when I go there with my daughter and we get ice cream, we go down the band shell, and I see kids rolling down the green, and I see people on the boardwalk and this prom, and they're taking pictures, and people on the patios with their first date. We've had people, we've got married, we've got people who've been engaged. Yeah. You name it. And if you can't get motivated by that, you shouldn't be working for Howard Hughes. And the great thing about our company too is not just a property, it's a community. So when our team members get up in the morning and they drive to work here in the Woodlands, every school, every church, every trail, every park, every hospital, we had a part in. Now, maybe small parts, we may have sold the land to a hospital, but we determined that needs to be a hospital for this community. We built the park. We decided that this elementary school needed to go right here. And that's pretty dang cool.
It is.
I know.
And if that doesn't motivate you, then yeah. Now, my challenge is to connect those dots to everybody in my company, not just the people that are doing the construction or the design. Accountants, IT, HR, all these other departments. And so every day, that's something I think about, is how do I connect them to that work? It's important. You may be an accountant, you may be accounts payable, you may be paying vendors well, why are you paying this vendor? Well, that vendor just completed, 6 miles of new trails, and he needs to be paid for that. And let's go check out those trails. Let's go look at it, because you have a part in making that happen. It's not just the person out there pouring the concrete.
Yes. Celebrating everyone for the wins. I love that.
But there's a lot of other parts of that, growth, having very open communication, honesty, all those sort of things are critical to growing people and giving them a reason to be motivated, showing them how they can get to their goals. You got to understand their goals, and let's work together to get to them.
Yes, so true.
Yeah. One of the things that, from a podcast I was listening to, it says, one of the ways, stress it's hard to combat, but burnout is actually easier when you find a passion where you work. And of course, it comes with culture and not being a jerk. But, if all of those elements are right and you're still burnt out, then maybe you haven't found a passion in your job. And so I feel like everything you said kind of ties it back to that podcast where, you just got to find that passion. You got to find something that drives you, motivates you, and makes you feel fulfilled.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and look, it's not always going to be that passion. There's parts of my job that I love and I just get so fired up on. And then there's stuff that you got to do because that's your job. That's part of the job. You can't always get to pick and choose some of that stuff, and that's okay. But be honest with yourself and with your, and be honest with your team. Like, this part is really cool, but you need to do your TPS reports too, right?
Yeah.
Well, is there any more nuggets you would like to share before we end our podcast today?
I would just say that, again, work-life balance, everybody's unique. And I would never encourage somebody to work 7 days a week or for 5 months straight or, 9 to 9, Monday through Saturday. But I wouldn't discourage either, if that's what their goals are and that's what motivates them and what makes them feel fulfilled. But again, I just stress that it's never going to be perfect. If you have perfect work-life balance, let's talk, because you probably aren't doing something on one of those sides of the equation quite right. Honestly, it's going to go up, it's going to go down. It may be by day, it may be by week, it may be by month. But just be cognizant of it. Understand, this week I am working extra hard, but you know what? I'm going to take next Friday off. And I'm going to get that thing back in balance. And so I don't need to stress that this week I'm working too hard because, hey, there's a goal and there's an end date period. And I'm going to take next Friday off.
Yes. So we just encourage our viewers to take some time to recharge and find out what works for you in your life for that work-life balance. And we want to thank Jim Carman for being our guest today. So we thank you, Jim, for dropping some great information for us to take back and implement into our daily routine. I feel like that work-life balancing. I'm still trying to make it happen for us, but thank you for sharing some information, and we look forward to possibly having a follow-up with you again soon.
No, I had a great time. Thanks for having me.
And we thank everyone for taking the time viewing the YPN Network podcast. Thank you.